Maria Contadino woke up every morning at 4 o'clock to bake bread. For 30 years, the smell of fresh dough had filled her small kitchen before the sun even rose. Her bakery, tucked between a laundromat and a shoe repair shop, was the heart of the neighborhood. People came not just for the bread, but for Maria herself. She had a warm smile, a kind word for everyone, and eyes that never seemed to judge anyone, no matter what they had done. She had raised her son, Daniel, alone after her husband passed away when the boy was only 9 years old. She worked long hours to give him a good life. She wanted him to study, to build something honest, something that would make her proud. For a while it seemed like he would. He was smart, charming, and had a way of making people trust him instantly. But somewhere along the way, things changed. By the time Daniel turned 20, he had drifted into a world his mother did not fully understand. He started working for a man named Salvatore Rocca, known in the city as a powerful figure who controlled several businesses. Some called him a businessman. Others, in quiet whispers, called him something else entirely. Maria told herself that her son was just doing paperwork, driving cars and running small errands. She did not ask too many questions. Deep down, she was afraid of what the answers might be. Daniel began as a driver. Soon he moved up to handling numbers, tracking money that came in and out of businesses that did not always make sense on paper. He was good with numbers, good with secrets, and good at staying calm even when things around him became complicated. He told himself he was simply surviving, doing what he had to do to build a future. But surviving in that world came with a price. And one day, that price arrived in the form of federal agents. It happened on a quiet Tuesday morning. Daniel was leaving his apartment when 2 agents approached him. They did not raise their voices. They did not need to. They simply showed him documents, recordings, and evidence that connected him directly to years of illegal activity tied to Rocca's operations. If convicted, Daniel could spend 25 years in prison. Daniel felt the ground shift beneath him. He thought of his future, his freedom, and everything he had built, now hanging by a thread. He thought about prison, about losing years of his life, about becoming a stranger to the world outside. Panic rose in his chest, but he did not let it show. Instead, his mind began to work quickly, searching for a way out. The agents offered him a deal. If he could help them build a case against Rocca, he could avoid the harshest punishment. But there was a problem. Daniel's own testimony would not be enough. He had been too close to the operation. His words could easily be doubted, twisted, or dismissed as revenge from someone trying to save himself. They needed someone the jury would believe without question. Someone with a spotless reputation. Someone whose only motivation could be love, not self-interest. Daniel thought of his mother. At first, the idea frightened even him. Maria had nothing to do with this world. She had spent her whole life staying far away from it, keeping her head down, focusing only on her bakery and her son. But the more Daniel thought about it, the more he convinced himself that this was not a betrayal. It was necessity. It was survival. He told himself that if his mother testified, he could finally escape this life completely, and one day, he could make it up to her. He began to plan carefully, choosing his words with precision, never revealing his true intentions. Over the following weeks, Daniel visited his mother more often than usual. He brought her coffee in the mornings and sat with her in the back of the bakery while she kneaded dough. Slowly, gently, he began planting small seeds of information. He would mention a name he had overheard. He would describe a warehouse he claimed to have driven past. He would speak of his own fear, letting his voice shake just enough to seem believable, saying he did not know how to escape the danger he had found himself in. Maria listened carefully every time. Her heart ached watching her son struggle. She began to piece together a story in her mind, one that made her believe her son was an innocent young man trapped by dangerous people, desperate to break free, but too afraid to speak up himself. She did not know that every piece of information she was collecting had been carefully placed there by her own son. One evening, 2 federal agents visited Maria at her home. They introduced themselves politely and explained that they were investigating criminal activity linked to Salvatore Rocca. They told her they believed she might have valuable information, given her location near several of Rocca's businesses and her connection to people in the community. They never mentioned Daniel's involvement in guiding them to her. They simply presented themselves as investigators following leads. Maria felt her chest tighten. She thought of her son, of the fear she had seen in his eyes, of the stories he had shared with her. In that moment, everything seemed to make sense to her. She believed this was her chance to protect Daniel, to help remove Rocca from his life forever, to finally set her son free from the shadows that had followed him for years. She did not think of herself. She thought only of her boy. Maria agreed to help. In the months that followed, Maria worked closely with investigators, sharing every detail she had gathered, unaware that most of it had been shaped and guided by Daniel's careful hints. She described conversations she believed she had pieced together herself. She spoke of deliveries, meetings, and warnings she thought she had noticed on her own. Her account was detailed, emotional, and deeply human. It did not sound rehearsed because, in her mind, it wasn't. She believed every word she said. When the trial began, the courtroom was filled with tension. Salvatore Rocca sat calmly at the defense table, confident that no one close to him would ever testify against him. He had built his reputation on loyalty, fear, and control. He did not expect a quiet, humble bakery owner to become the center of his downfall. When Maria took the stand, the room grew silent. She wore a simple blue dress, her hands trembling slightly as she settled into the witness chair. She spoke softly at first, her voice shaking with nerves, but as she continued, her words grew stronger, driven by the love she felt for her son. She described what she believed she had learned, connecting details about money, meetings, and threats, weaving together a story that painted a clear picture of Rocca's criminal operations. Her sincerity was impossible to fake. The jury watched her closely, moved not just by her words, but by the raw emotion behind them. She was not a criminal seeking a deal, she was a mother trying to save her son. For 11 days, Maria returned to the courtroom, answering questions from both the prosecution and the defense. Rocca's lawyers tried to shake her story, searching for inconsistencies, hoping to prove she was mistaken or exaggerating. But Maria's account, though shaped by her son's guidance, held together because she believed it completely. There was no hesitation rooted in dishonesty, only the natural nervousness of someone speaking in public for the first time in her life. By the final day of her testimony, even Rocca's own legal team admitted, quietly among themselves, that they had never expected such a devastating blow to come from someone so unconnected to their usual world of informants and rivals. When the jury returned their verdict, the courtroom fell into a heavy silence. Salvatore Rocca was found guilty on multiple serious charges. The judge sentenced him to spend the rest of his life in prison. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered, eager to speak with the woman who had helped bring down one of the city's most feared figures. Maria stood quietly, overwhelmed by the attention, holding tightly to the hope that her son was finally safe. Daniel stood beside her, playing the role of a relieved and grateful son perfectly. He hugged his mother, thanked her softly, and let his eyes fill with tears that seemed, to everyone watching, like tears of gratitude and relief. No one suspected that his emotions were carefully managed, just like everything else he had done throughout the entire process. In the weeks that followed, life changed quickly for both of them. Because of the danger associated with testifying against a man like Rocca, Maria was placed into a witness protection program. She had to leave her bakery, her home, and the neighborhood she had lived in for decades. She said goodbye to old friends and familiar streets, believing this sacrifice was necessary to keep herself and her son safe forever. Daniel, on the other hand, received something far more valuable to him: complete legal immunity. Because of his cooperation with investigators from the very beginning, though never publicly acknowledged, he was allowed to walk away from the case with a clean record. Under the arrangement, he was also given a new identity, separate from his mother's, designed to ensure that nothing could ever trace the original tip back to him. He told his mother that they needed to live apart for their own safety, that separating their identities would protect them both from any remaining associates of Rocca who might seek revenge. Maria accepted this explanation without question. She trusted her son completely. She believed, until the end of her life, that everything that had happened was simply the result of unfortunate circumstances, danger from the outside world, and her own brave decision to speak the truth in order to save him. She never learned that her son had been the one who arranged the meeting with the agents in the first place. She never discovered that the details she believed she had gathered on her own had been carefully guided into her mind through casual conversations, gentle suggestions, and calculated moments of vulnerability designed to earn her trust. In her new life, far from the neighborhood she had once called home, Maria opened a small bakery once again. The smell of fresh bread filled her new kitchen every morning, just as it had for decades before. She often thought of her son, proud of the sacrifice she believed she had made for him. She imagined him living safely somewhere, finally free from the dangerous world that had once surrounded him. She kept a photograph of the two of them on her kitchen shelf, taken years earlier before everything had changed. She looked at it often, remembering the boy who used to help her carry flour sacks, the boy who used to fall asleep on the bakery counter waiting for her to finish work. To her, he would always be that boy, innocent and in need of protection. Daniel, living under his new identity in a different city, built a quiet, comfortable life. He avoided any connection to his past, careful never to draw attention to himself. Sometimes, late at night, He thought of his mother. He told himself that he had done what was necessary, that circumstances had forced his hand, that there had been no other way to escape the danger he had found himself trapped in. He never allowed himself to fully accept the truth, that his mother's sacrifice had not been forced upon her by outside danger, but shaped carefully by his own hands. He justified it to himself again and again, choosing to believe that love had guided his choices, rather than fear and self-preservation. Years passed. Maria grew older, her hands slower at kneading dough, her hair turning gray, but her heart remained unchanged. She continued to believe, with complete certainty, that she had once found the courage to stand up to a powerful man in order to protect her son. She often told her story to close friends in her new community, always speaking with pride about the day she chose bravery over fear. She never knew the full truth. She never learned that the boy she had risked everything to save had been the true architect of the entire plan. To the end of her life, Maria Contadino believed she had rescued her son from a world of danger. She never discovered that it was her son who had quietly chosen her, from the very beginning, to carry the weight of his freedom. And perhaps, in some strange way, that quiet belief was its own kind of peace. She lived out her remaining years content, proud, and at ease, holding on to a story that gave her comfort, even if it was not the complete truth. Some secrets, once buried deep enough, never rise back to the surface. And for Maria, that buried secret allowed her to spend her final years believing that love, courage, and sacrifice had triumphed in the end. Whether that belief was built on truth or illusion, it gave her peace. And in the end, perhaps that peace was the only thing that truly mattered to her.